In many cultures, pregnancy is something to celebrate. Families throw parties, neighbors bring gifts, and there's a sense of anticipation that fills the home. For Shinichi and Mitsuko Moriya, that anticipation had been building for weeks. Mitsuko was past her due date, and any day now, they'd become parents. One day, he came home from work in Nagoya, Japan, to find his apartment dark and his pregnant wife not answering. Then he heard a baby crying. What he found inside became one of Japan's most disturbing unsolved cases. This is the 1988 Nagoya Pregnant Woman Murder case. The whole data broker thing has honestly become really frustrating for me. I get calls from numbers I do not recognize. And it's not once or twice a day. Some days it's up to 5 calls. And I keep asking myself, what even happened to my number? Who sold it? It's not just calls. I get messages all the time from people who already know my name and personal details, asking me to click on links that look completely real. That's when I realized this isn't random. Our data is being collected and traded all the time, often without us even knowing. And once your data is out there, it can be used for way more than scams. People can open credit accounts in your name, steal your identity, or even find your home address and information about your family. Fixing that kind of damage can take months, sometimes even years. That's why we need services like Incogni, the sponsor of today's video. And I'm genuinely grateful when the right sponsors reach out to me, because if something like this can help my viewers protect their privacy and avoid real harm, I am more than happy to introduce it. Incogni helps remove your personal information from across the internet, not just data brokers, by reaching out to websites and companies on your behalf and requesting deletion. And you know that doing this on your own would take forever, but Incogni handles it for you. I also really like that you can see what's happening through the dashboard and track progress over time. And with Incogni's custom removal feature available on the Unlimited and Family Unlimited plans, you can point out any website where your information appears, and their privacy agents will take care of it. If you want to take back some control, go to incogni.com/darkasia and use my code DARKASIA for 60% off. Your personal information is valuable, and if you're not protecting it, someone else is profiting from it. Take your privacy back. On the evening of March 18th, 1988, around 7:40 p.m., Shinichi rushed home after his pregnant wife didn't answer his calls. When he arrived at their apartment in Nagoya's Nakagawa district, the place was dark. He touched the doorknob and found it unlocked. Then he heard something, a cry of a baby. His first thought was that Mitsuko had gone into labor while he was at work. Maybe she delivered alone and was too exhausted to turn on the lights. He flipped the switch. What he found was his wife lying on the floor near the electric heater. Her legs splayed, blood pooled around her. A baby boy lay beside her, crying, the umbilical cord already cut. Mitsuko had wires wrapped around her neck, and her clothes were soaked red. Her stomach had been cut open. Her hands were tied behind her back. Shinichi stood frozen for a moment before his instincts kicked in. He went to grab the house phone to call for help, but it wasn't there. He ran to a neighbor's apartment downstairs and dialed emergency services. "The phone's been ripped out and the baby is out. Please let me use your phone," he said, according to the neighbor's later account. She thought a baby had simply been born. She had no idea what had actually happened upstairs. When paramedics arrived and began treating Mitsuko, they discovered something inside her body. The missing telephone had been shoved into her open abdomen, along with a Mickey Mouse keychain, an item that belonged to Shinichi's car keys, which had been left at home that day. Mitsuko's wounds were too severe. She'd lost too much blood. She was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at the hospital. The baby, against all odds, survived. To understand what happened that day, it helps to know who Mitsuko was. She was 27 years old, in her third year of marriage to 21-year-old Shinichi. They rented a modest apartment in a two-story building located about 500 meters northeast of Toda Station on the Kintetsu-Nagoya line. The building was fairly new, completed in 1985, but like many apartments at the time, it lacked sophisticated security. No access control, no fences. The area was a developing residential zone, with condominiums scattered among fields and open lots. Not many people walked by, especially after dark. The Moriyas lived on the second floor. Two other households occupied the first floor, and the remaining unit next to theirs was vacant. Mitsuko had quit her office job when she became pregnant, settling into life as a housewife. But she wasn't the type to sit still. She'd gotten involved with Amway, the direct sales company helping advertise products to other housewives in the neighborhood. It got her out of the house, gave her something to do, and helped her build friendships with the women around her. That Friday, March 18th, started like any other day. Shinichi, who worked at a Sony-affiliated equipment sales company, left for work in the morning. Since Mitsuko had entered her third semester, he'd made it a habit to call her during lunch and come straight home after work without taking overtime. He'd pick up groceries on the way so she wouldn't have to go out. He'd cook dinner. He was nervous and excited. Their due date had actually passed a few days earlier, around March 13th, so the baby could come at any time. That afternoon, Shinichi called home like he always did. In the morning, Mitsuko had answered cheerfully. But when he called again later, around 6:50 p.m., she didn't pick up. He tried multiple times. Nothing. He left work early and headed home. At 7:43 p.m., Shinichi called the Nagoya City Fire Department from his neighbor's phone, reporting that his child had been born and needed medical attention. When paramedics arrived, they found Mitsuko in the south side living room, strangled with an electric kotatsu cord. Her abdomen sliced open from the solar plexus down, a cut roughly 38 centimeters long, made with something sharp. The baby had been removed through this incision. In place of the fetus, someone had stuffed the telephone and keychain inside her. Mitsuko was wearing a blue maternity dress, a sweater, a pink jumper, and black pantyhose. All of it was drenched in blood. She was lying face up with her head pointing south. The telephone was a small push-button model. Its cord had been cut with a blade. By the time police arrived, someone, likely a paramedic, had already removed it from her body during transport. When investigators examined the baby at the hospital, they'd found he'd been cut multiple times. Reports varied. Some newspapers said 3 wounds, others said 4, but the injuries were to his back, the back of his knee, his buttocks, and his groin area. He also showed signs of anemia from blood loss and hypothermia from the cold. His body temperature had dropped to about 30 degrees Celsius. He weighed 2.9 kilograms. The baby spent 15 days in the hospital. He underwent surgery and received a blood transfusion from his paternal grandfather. And he survived. The Aichi Prefectural Police established a special investigation headquarters at Nakagawa Station. From the start, they suspected this was personal, a crime committed by someone with a grudge against Mitsuko. A forensic autopsy conducted by Professor Yoshinao Katsumata of Nagoya University determined the cause of death: strangulation. The incision to her abdomen appeared to have been made after she was already dead. Notably, her clothes hadn't been cut. The killer had lifted them before slicing her open. Her birth canal was closed, which confirmed the baby had been removed through the abdominal wound, not delivered naturally. The umbilical cord had already been cut by the perpetrator. The estimated time of death was somewhere between 2:30 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. but witness testimony helped narrow that window. A friend from Kaniecho in Aichi Prefecture had visited Mitsuko that afternoon. She arrived around 1:50 p.m. with her 3-year-old daughter, bringing 2 boxes of strawberries as a gift. They sat and talked while eating the strawberries, and the friend left around 3 p.m. for a hair appointment at 3:30, which the salon confirmed. During the autopsy, investigators found a large amount of undigested strawberries in Mitsuko's stomach, suggesting she died relatively soon after eating them. A postal worker came around 4 p.m. to deliver a postcard. He didn't notice anything unusual. The postcard was later found still sitting in the mailbox, notable because Mitsuko was known to collect her mail promptly. Police also noted that Mitsuko had a habit of washing dishes right after using them. But on that day, the teacup from her visit with her friend was still dirty, left on the kotatsu table along with a glass bowl that had held the strawberries. A neighbor on the first floor reported seeing a suspicious man around 3 p.m. He was about 30 years old, around 165 centimeters tall, with a round face and dressed like an office worker. He'd asked the neighbor, "Do you know where Mr. Nakamura lives?" There was no one named Nakamura living in the building. The neighbor thought he seemed restless and strange. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken locks, no damaged windows. The friend mentioned that when she left, Mitsuko had walked her down to the parking lot and didn't lock the door behind her. She also recalled hearing a sound like a doorknob turning during her visit, but Mitsuko dismissed it as the ventilation fan. This raised a possibility. The killer may have entered while Mitsuko was seeing her friend off and waited for her to return. Based on all this, police estimated the murder occurred in a narrow window, between about 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. The investigation turned up no fingerprints, no signs of a struggle, and no murder weapon. The scene had been cleaned. There was evidence the perpetrator had washed blood off in the kitchen before leaving. Mitsuko's wallet was missing, and her dresser had been rummaged through. This suggested robbery might have been part of the motive. Shinichi mentioned that when he found Mitsuko, her neck was wrapped in what looked like wire, not the nylon rope the autopsy identified. Police speculated the killer may have swapped the ligature to mislead them. Given all this, investigators believe the perpetrator knew Mitsuko or had carefully planned the attack. The first suspect they looked at was Shinichi himself. Statistically, it made sense. The spouse is often the first person police consider. And there were questions. Shinichi arrived home to a dark, unlocked apartment. And before searching for his missing wife, he changed into house clothes. Why? At a press conference after the murder, he appeared calm, mentioning that his wife liked wine and he would offer wine at her funeral. To some, this seemed too composed for a man who had just lost his wife in such a horrific way. But Shinichi's alibi checked out. His co-workers confirmed he'd been at the office during the estimated time of death, between 3 and 4 p.m. Next, the police looked at the friend who had visited that afternoon. She was the last known person to see Mitsuko alive. But her hair salon appointment gave her an alibi, and the timeline didn't quite fit, and she was eventually cleared. Police also investigated whether Mitsuko's Amway business had caused any conflicts. The nature of direct sales can sometimes create friction, but no evidence of disputes emerged. Then came a key piece of testimony. Someone had seen a man running out of the apartment building in a panic around 3:10 p.m. If true, this created 2 possibilities. Either that man was the killer, or he wasn't. If he was the killer, then the murder had to have happened in roughly 10 minutes, the time between the friend leaving and the man fleeing. That would mean subduing Mitsuko, strangling her, cutting her open, removing the baby, inserting the phone and keychain, and cleaning up the scene, all in under 10 minutes, which seemed unlikely. If he wasn't the killer, then who was he? Some speculated he might have been a thief who stumbled onto the scene and ran. Several theories emerged about the perpetrator because the incision was 38 centimeters long and appeared to have been made with some precision using what seemed like a thin blade drawn across the same spot 2 or 3 times. Some investigators initially wondered if the killer had medical knowledge. Police began looking at doctors and medical students. But an obstetrician who reviewed the wounds pointed out several problems with this theory. In a real cesarean section, the incision is made horizontally, not vertically. If a vertical cut is necessary, it's made from just below the navel downward, not from the solar plexus. And surgeons cut carefully through layers of tissue, not in a long slash. The wound on Mitsuko was the work of an amateur. Another theory involved the possibility of a juvenile offender. This was shortly after the Nagoya murder case, a brutal crime committed by teenagers that had shocked the nation. Some wondered if the bizarre, almost experimental nature of the crime, cutting open a pregnant woman and placing objects inside, suggested someone young, someone who didn't fully grasp the gravity of what they were doing. But the police noted that the perpetrator had entered the apartment wearing shoes and left footprints. The shoe size was 25 centimeters, adult-sized. They dismissed the juvenile theory, though some journalists later pointed out that a high school student's feet could easily be that large. Around this time, Toshiumi Ishii, a researcher from Tokyo Medical and Dental University, offered a psychological profile. He suggested the killer may have had a specific fascination with pregnant women, a desire to see inside, to perform a kind of crude experiment. Under this theory, the objects placed inside Mitsuko's body took on symbolic meaning. The telephone receiver could represent the placenta, the cord, the umbilical cord, the Mickey Mouse keychain, the fetus. The stranger may have strangled Mitsuko first to prevent resistance, then perform a kind of ritualistic act. The goal wasn't to take the baby, it was left at the scene, but to satisfy some psychological compulsion. Ishii suggested this type of offender might not be a serial killer, but someone who would be satisfied with a single act. It was a disturbing theory, but it fit some of the evidence. About a year later, in early March 1989, a new lead surfaced. A pregnant woman living near the scene reported that a suspicious man had followed her home and knocked on her door, saying, "I have something to show you. Please open it." She described him as being in his early 20s, around 160 to 170 centimeters tall, with a medium build and a quiet demeanor. He approached her at a time when few people were around. The description shared some similarities with the suspicious man seen on the day of the murder. The focus on pregnant women, the approach to apartments during low traffic hours, but no definitive connection was established. Around this time, investigators learned something new. A few days before her death, Mitsuko had mentioned to a relative that she'd received a phone call from someone selling underwear door to door. Police began investigating about 40 vendors operating in the area, but nothing came out of it. Despite the extensive investigation, physical evidence was scarce. The only concrete trace left behind was a footprint from a size 25 shoe. When investigators traced the shoe, they found it was a counterfeit of a well-known brand, manufactured in South Korea or Taiwan. The distribution channels led nowhere. Police eventually concluded that the crime was likely a robbery gone wrong. Someone had broken in looking for money, encountered Mitsuko, and killed her. The bizarre mutilation, they theorized, was an expression of some latent compulsion that emerged during or after the killing. A former investigation headquarters official later told the Mainichi Shimbun, "People focused on the grotesque aspect, the cutting of a pregnant woman's abdomen. But given how thoroughly the perpetrator destroyed evidence, this was likely a robbery. The bizarre behavior was just something that surfaced from within the killer during the crime. The investigation expanded across the Tokai region and even into the Kinki area along the Kintetsu rail lines. Over 1,000 suspicious individuals were identified and investigated, including people with criminal records in both Osaka and Nagoya. Police also reached out to other prefectures, even inquiring about Tsutomu Miyazaki, the serial killer arrested in 1989 for the Tokyo Saitama child murders, to see if there was a connection, but there wasn't. By the second anniversary of the crime, police had deployed over 23,000 investigators. Tips from the public had slowed to about one per month. Officers going door to door were sometimes met with, "Are you still working on this?" In the years that followed, Shinichi stayed in the apartment for about a year. The baby went to live with his paternal grandparents in Aichi Prefecture. In 1991, Shinichi's father died of stomach cancer. 3 years later, as the boy was about to enter elementary school, Shinichi moved in with his mother and son near the home of Mitsuko's parents. He eventually quit his job and started a business with friends. In April 1999, when the boy entered 6th grade, Shinichi, his mother, and the boy moved to Hawaii, leaving Japan behind. According to reporting at the time, the boy still didn't know the full story of how his mother had died. Mitsuko's father, who was living in Urawa, Saitama Prefecture, spoke to journalists in the years leading up to the statute of limitations. "If she had died from illness or an accident, I might have been able to accept it," he said. "But she was born with a cruel fate." On March 18, 2003, exactly 15 years after the murder, the statute of limitations expired. The case was officially closed. Over the course of the investigation, police had deployed approximately 40,000 officers and interviewed thousands of people. They chased leads across the Tokai and Kinki regions, traced counterfeit shoes to factories in South Korea and Taiwan, and questioned over 1,000 suspects. But in the end, they concluded the murder was likely committed by a stranger, someone with no known connection to Mitsuko. And that conclusion never sat right with everyone. Fetal abduction murders have happened before, in Japan and elsewhere. In most of those cases, the killer takes the baby. They're driven by some desperate desire to have a child of their own. That didn't happen here. The baby was left on the floor beside his mother. A telephone and a keychain were placed inside her instead. It felt personal, symbolic. But no one could ever explain what it meant. Whoever did this covered their tracks carefully. They wiped their fingerprints, washed the blood off in the kitchen, and walked out of that apartment without leaving a single usable piece of evidence behind. The only trace was a footprint from a counterfeit shoe, which led nowhere. Mitsuko Moriya was 27 years old, 5 days past her due date. She should have lived to be a mother. Her son is in his late 30s now, older than she ever got to be. He never heard her voice, never saw her face except in photographs. The first moment of his life was the last of hers. After 37 years, justice seems unlikely, but somewhere, someone knows what happened in that apartment. Maybe it's the person who did it. Maybe it's someone they told. The statute of limitations ran out, but the truth doesn't expire. For Mitsuko's sake, and for the son she never got to hold, I hope one day it comes to light. That is all for today. Thanks for watching.